Take roll, please.
Branch,
Here.
Bray, Carroll,
Here.
Graham, Henry,
Here.
Hussey,
Here.
Mahalovich, Prather,
Here.
Schulte,
Here.
Scribner.
Thank you. Tonight is a continuation of the Budget Committee work session. At our last meeting, we got through the mayor's proposed budget and each item that was affected, and we discussed those. Tonight, we're going to start off and go right into department directors' reports. They're going to talk to us about the impact that the budget has on their departments, what their the pink sheets or what goals that they might have that we're not able to fund, what staffing levels are, and any other questions or any other comments that they might have. I would also like to encourage the council, if there's any particular topic that the mayor has in his budget that affects the departments as we're going through those, that would be a good time to ask additional questions with regard to those, or if there's a motion to be made, that would be an appropriate time to make a motion regarding those particular line items as well. Is there any questions of the council before we dive into the departments, specific departments? None? Okay, have a list here. They're not in any particular order. This was just put together to try to look at the time that we have allotted for tonight's meeting and provide for a good stopping point. And so they're not in any particular order. I would like to, between tonight and Thursday night, get through the general fund departments, if we could. And so first we'll hear from police, then mayor, council, city administrator, city clerk, public works, city councilor, municipal court, human resources, fire, finance, IT, planning and protective, and then non-departmental. So we will start off with police first. Chief, you're on. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by at least sharing with you our mission statement and why is that important. We're very proud of that mission statement. And I want to tell you a couple of reasons why. First of all, that was written by our own employees. Shortly after I came, I asked for input as to how everyone felt regarding our mission, our purpose, and what we intended to do with our community and as we interacted. And so we took a variety of pieces from different sources and put it I guess this is the result of that. I want to couple that with something you said, Mr. Chairman, last Thursday, and that was departments should, when making their presentations, talk about how the budget relates to really their purpose and what we do in the community. So as we go through these slides, things will relate back to this mission statement. This is the purpose, this is what we intend to achieve each and every day, and without that budget and without the people within that are paid from that budget, we can't accomplish these things. So the next slide reflects, and they don't have our second slide. Try the third slide and see if it was just inverted. Okay. We said we took all 5 budgets that we manage and we computed the different categories, the different subsections of the budget. And as one can see, the personnel section is 90.73%, I think, of all 5 budgets. We are a people service, and that service is provided by people, and that's reflected in that pie chart. The other increments are very small compared to personnel. That's what the police department's all about, people. People helping people. So if we can proceed then to, or revert back to the second slide, and that is our organizational chart. 128 dedicated professionals. You can see the recapitulation on the lower left-hand corner. We are a paramilitary organization divided into 3 divisions, as reflected in the blue rectangles. The little numbers within each of those rectangles reflect how many people are assigned to each of those different titles or units, sections, things of that nature. So you can see we're pretty diverse. If you go across the middle in those gray rectangles, you'll see the different sections that we will more specifically address here in the next 10 minutes or so, and I do appreciate the time constraints. So as you can see, we have a patrol section, a traffic unit, an investigation section, a community action team, community services section, communication section, records section, and animal control section, right through the middle. And that forms the basis of our service. So we could proceed then to administration. The leadership of the next one, please. 2 more. The command structure, as I said, we're paramilitary. There are 9 command officers in the police department, myself, and then we have a captain that heads each of the 3 divisions, and we have 5 lieutenants. 3 of those lieutenants are assigned to the patrol section. We have a lieutenant in the special services division, and then we have a lieutenant in the office of professional standards. So that forms the heart of the leadership group. We can proceed then. We're going to talk a little bit about each of the divisions. So the first is the operations division, commanded by a captain. We have a patrol section and traffic unit. If you look, it is the largest section of the police department, and I think that's reflected in the next slide. So when we talk about the operations division, that is the largest section within the police department. That's the most visible. That's comprised of the officers that drive those marked patrol cars and are assigned to various areas of the city and answer our calls for service. You can see they do the initial investigations of all offenses, incidents, anything that a community member is concerned about. These are the officers that respond and provide that initial assistance in some manner. We'll note that in the middle of crime prevention, that's really, and things of that nature, that's really every member of our police department's responsibility, but we put it under this particular area because that's really the face of the department in many ways, and so that's why we assign that as a primary function of the operations section. And then also that would apply to the development of relationships between citizens and the department. That's for everyone within our department to do. It's an important element of each job description and something that we're very sensitive to and strive to achieve every single day. So we could move on. The traffic unit is another section of that division. As you can see, they're primarily concerned with traffic law enforcement. Directed enforcement means if there's a particular problem regarding traffic, the flow of traffic violations, things of that nature, we assign that to the traffic unit, and they go out and they resolve that problem. They also investigate almost all of our traffic accidents. They'll provide escorts, things of that nature. And I want to promise you that I will not read every one of our bullets to you, and we can provide this to you tomorrow, but I just want to hit the highlights. We can proceed then. And this is the second division, the Special Services Division. As you see, there's 3 different components of that. We got the Community Action Team, the Community Services Unit, and the Criminal Investigations Section. You can see more specifically what are the titles of those officers and how many officers are assigned to each of those units, and that's reflected there at the bottom. And you can see that this is quite a diverse division. There's a lot of things that are achieved by this division, and this probably is more interaction with the community in a non-adversarial way. We do a lot of problem solving. And let's move on to the Community Action Team, because that's really our problem solving unit. That's primarily the community policing team, and that's just basically going into respective neighborhoods and solving problems. It doesn't have to be a law enforcement problem. It could be something like weeds or lighting or anything of that nature, and we'll bring in the right agency or department, all with the purpose of solving that neighborhood problem. We talk about diversity. You see, we also have our K-9 unit. Our crime prevention officer works out of that. Some of our narcotics detectives work for the community with the community action team. And the whole purpose is to promote community involvement and networking with our community. We move on. The community action team community programs. We wanted to give you a flavor of what we very directly, how we interact with our community, programs that we sponsor, programs that we initiated, some of them many, many years ago, as many as 30, 35 years ago. Such as Operation Toys at the bottom of that list. But we have a crime-free multi-housing program we offer periodically, our Crime Stoppers program, something that's become, unfortunately, a contemporary issue right now, and that's the heroin overdose problems that we have. We've had quite a few fatalities because of heroin overdoses, and so we put together our HOPE campaign, heroin overdose prevention education, and I will tell you that after about 3 or 4 of those community presentations, the number of fatalities and overdoses went down significantly, so we were extremely proud of that. Something that Officer Kemker has initiated is our rape aggression defense training. We've had a couple of those classes. It's very intense. It takes several nights, and it has been very well received, and we look forward to offering that periodically for a long, long time. And the feedback, of course, has been very positive. Everybody's heard of Neighborhood Watch for many, many years. We work very closely with the Downtown Business Association and things of that nature. Officer Walker has done a great job with some of his co-workers as far as food drives, the Buddy Backpack program, things of that nature. We can proceed. We're going to talk about community service, and that community service unit really are the officers that we assign to our schools. We have about 10% of our officers are assigned to schools, and I hope that clearly reflects how important we take that responsibility, that we're willing to assign 10% of our sworn personnel to our schools. And other titles you hear, school resource officers, DARE officers. The purpose of those of our being in those schools is threefold. As you will see, they function as a police officer, although that's not the primary reason they're in the schools. They're also an educator. They literally go into class at the request of the respective schools. They will teach classes, and then we counsel. A lot of kids will talk to us, believe it or not, and we make sometimes lifetime friendships with the kids that never forget that we were there when unfortunately many of them have no one else to help them, and we will do that. So we can move on. Special Services Division, Criminal Investigation Section. This is the third section of the Special Services Division that we mentioned several slides ago. As you can see, it's got crimes, crimes, crimes. Our detectives are the people that they take the crimes after initially investigated by patrol officers. They then follow up with more intense investigations, interrogations, interviews, collection of evidence, and things of that nature. So extremely important. They're the ones that take that initial report and run it through to its very end with testimony in circuit court, and in most cases a conviction. I think we're going to go on to the next, and that's Support Services Division. Remember, they have, we said they had 3 sections also. We have the records section, communications section, and animal control section. And then a list of, again, the assignments within those particular units and the number of people assigned to each of those units. The records section, and this is where I hope put your mind at ease. I'm not going to read those different bullet points to you. But the records section, we document everything that we do. Much of it is begun in the communications center downstairs. But then eventually there's reports, there's accident reports, there's crime reports, there's just a myriad of different types of documents, and our records section comprised of just a few people, but they ensure that everything is prepared. The packets are prepared for eventual submission to the prosecutor's office. It's an extremely important job, and they receive very little credit, considering the importance of their role in any police department, particularly in ours. So the next section, I think, is going to be communications. As I said, we have about 75,000 people in our county, and we have 20 people assigned to the communications section. So a very select group and a very important function. They receive, except for the officer-initiated calls, all the other calls from any person within our community, passing through our community, who requires some type of police, fire, or medical attention. Most of those calls originate in that communications center. They are trained interviewers. They take a little bit of information, and they know how to expand that and what questions to ask and how to ask them quickly, while at the same time, as a team, while one person is asking questions, another person is dispatching the appropriate units, all intended to have a very fast response time and provide the people who are responding with the basic information to keep them safe, and allow them to prepare mentally for what they're going to do once they get there. So extremely important, our communications center. If we go to the next slide, we'll see just how important is it. Well, we serve those 7 agencies. So we have obviously the EMS, Cole County EMS, but we have the Cole County Sheriff's Office. We communicate for the fire departments within our county, all of those fire departments. Are we busy? We receive approximately, or at least handle approximately 141,000 different types of activities. How do we arrive at 141,000? As one can see, we have those different subsections: police calls for service, those types of activities that are initiated by officers. That could be a traffic stop, it could be a crime in progress, it could be just someone maybe walking down the highway that needs some type of assistance. Fire, medical, sheriff's calls for service, and then miscellaneous activities. 141,000, divide that by 365 days, and you'll, I think, quickly appreciate how busy our 911 emergency center is. And then the next section is our animal control unit. What do? They also investigate crimes. They are compassionate group of people. I think it's unfortunate with the recent publicity that one maybe loses sight of the commitment that our animal control people have to the care and welfare of any animal within our community. Dogs and cats receive the most attention. That's the largest group, but the people that work out of that animal shelter are very committed. They have a very difficult job. As you can see the list, it's not always the easiest thing to do, but thank goodness we have people who are willing to do it. Is that it? I think when we were also supposed to briefly talk about pink sheets, and we submitted 2 initially, and I don't know if you still have the UPS or uninterrupted power supply source, whatever, on the list, but that was in cooperation with the IT department. We have purchased a new UPS system that will be installed on August 22nd, so that doesn't count anymore. That leaves 1 pink sheet for the police department, and that concerns the HVAC for our building. It's a very expensive item. We understand constraints, but we have a very unhealthy situation, and certainly would appreciate, as time and money will allow, addressing our HVAC system. One has to just look at the filth that's collected in the filters and things of that nature, and the stuff that flies out of the vents. It's pretty gross at times. So we have one item, but it's an important one. I also want to say that in closing, we appreciate the city administrator, Nathan Nicholas, who met with Lauren and I on 2 different days. Bill was with us, or his staff was with us, and we met for many hours discussing the budget, and we very much appreciate that input. So in the matter, they said 15 minutes, and I think maybe a little bit over 15 minutes, but if you look at, hopefully you'll see that those slides and the activities described in those slides all go back to that mission statement, meaning we serve this community in all those different ways, and without the money necessary to fund the people necessary to provide that service that's necessary, it doesn't get done. So thank you very much.
Chief, thank you for the presentation, and thank you and your staff for the work that you do within the city to keep us safe.
Thank you.
Questions of the council, and what I'd like to do is in your budget books, the first tab under Police Department, pages 46 through 48 is the Police Department budget, and then we'll touch School Resource Officer, Mustang Animal Control here in a second, but pages 46, 47, and 48 in your budget books. Are there any specific questions for the chief with regard to those pages? Okay, Mr. Graham?
That's probably not for chief, it's probably for Mr. Nicholas, but I noticed that not just police, but the other departments, there was an increase in salaries from 2013 to the proposed budget this year. Was that for a specific reason? Or is it health insurance or something like that?
I think it's actually for a couple different reasons. Health insurance is something that we've factored in here, and so that would show an increase. I want to make it clear we haven't included any kind of a raise in here, but there are things that push salaries up anyway. Some employees, for instance, in the police department, they have a career ladder program, and so employees would move up, and so you get some upward pressure on salaries just from that. And then also the way that we have figured the various vacancies that exist is those are all actually built into the budget, and we will sweep that money out so that it becomes a hard transaction, but it gives you an idea what the funding of the full funding of the department would really cost. So that's kind of a change in accounting that also has kind of moved things up a little bit.
Okay. And I figured that. I just wanted to be clear, because when I look at this, it seemed as if the increase was just solely in salaries, and certainly I was confused. It's not just police; it was throughout the departments.
That would be true throughout all the departments.
Okay. And I have one more question. As it relates to, I know we had talked about taking out gas to show each department the amount of gas that they're using. So I noticed this $310,000. Is that enough to cover the police department for the upcoming year, or was that what was budgeted last year?
It's a little difficult to tell. We believe that it is enough. It is based on the number that was used last year, but as we divide the things up between the different departments, there was a little bit of mathematics that we kind of applied. We did actually include more money this year than we've included in the past, because we know that the prices are going up and consumption seems to be going up. But really one of the reasons that we divided them into the departments is to really get a handle on not only is the consumption and cost going up, but exactly where is that happening. And,
Right.
and as you said, to get a really clear picture of what does it really cost to run a police department or a human resources department or city administrator's department. I don't
Thank you,
see
sir.
gas.
Thank you.
Mr. Hussey?
Thanks. Just a quick question on the overtime straight pay. I know there's overtime that's just, we accrue and have to pay out. Is any of that overtime a result of the fact that there's roughly 5 vacancies within the department as well?
Well, it's difficult to answer, and so I'm hesitant to try to answer that because I don't want to mislead anyone. We're large enough that we're all working a little bit harder or hopefully smarter, maybe rather than harder. You always want to work smarter. But there's no question that when you have some shortages, sometimes people have to fill in for others on an overtime basis. So we're more than that short because we have several people on military leave, we have some on extended medical leave, and we have several vacancies we haven't been able to fill yet, in addition to the SIP positions that are vacant. So we actually have about 12 positions that are vacant now, not at the direction of Mr. Nicholas, but for those other circumstances. So to what extent there is overtime, we don't keep track of those of overtime in that manner. I wish I had a better answer, but it'd be speculation.
Mr. Mihalovich, did you have something?
Yeah, three questions. Number one, this might be a theme, but I've been looking at what might be called the new normal of 2009 versus current, and your budget hadn't varied that much from that many years ago. So I know that it's tight and everybody's doing their job, and certainly the increase from 2009 to proposed 2012 is not too large. Do we know the amount of dollars that might be swept from these vacancy savings out of this?
For just police, I can get that for you in a minute. I don't have that right off the top, but I'll look and see here real quick. I think we know the total number, but not broken down by department.
Okay. I had one follow. To the degree you can tell, I don't know, what is CAD? I know computer-aided dispatch, but what is that?
Well, the term's been around a while, but when it was new, it was using computers to document all the information that came into a communication center. Who made that call was entered immediately. First of all, let me say the old system was handwritten. You had cards, and you'd write down the name of the person that called and the nature of the call, and you had a stamp, and you'd punch the stamp clock whenever you dispatched and when the officer arrived and things of that nature. So computer-aided dispatch was a wonderful thing because all of a sudden now with the keyboard you could much more quickly enter that data, and then it's in the system now, so it was more easily retrieved. And so computer-aided dispatch is conceptually it's just kind of that simple. Now, how they go about doing it and how our communications operators manage to do all that stuff, I don't know. I think if you would, I always ask or suggest that someone spend a few hours in our communications center and just watch that marvel, because it is something to see how you don't know what multitasking is until you've sat in that communications center. That's multitasking, and computer-aided dispatch is that. Everything is done through a keyboard.
Mr. Betts?
For police in its entirety, it's about, rounded numbers, about 466,000. So
That's basically flat since 2009.
Other questions for the chief? Mrs. Carroll?
I have a question about the HVAC that you talked about. And I know you mentioned it's a health concern and sounds like it could be. I'm wondering, and maybe it's something for the council to figure out. I don't have the number in front of me that you're asking, but I also wonder if it's something that for some reason can't be included in the budget, if there would be a way that we could at least start to budget for it for the following year. Like, could we talk about, I mean, I would hope we could cover it. If we can't, then perhaps a portion could be set aside now, knowing that we need to do it eventually. And I wonder too if there are any incentives out there. I know it seems like there tend to be a lot of energy efficient grants or different things that we could do. So I don't know if there's anything out there that, like, over the long run too, would this be a cost savings because getting new HVAC might save us money? Is there a payoff a certain period of time? Like, if we act on it sooner than later, will we see some cost savings for energy? And I guess too, when I think of this kind of thing, typically everything's housed in City Hall, so other departments aren't going to have to ask us in their budget for that kind of thing, but police and fire do because they're simply housed in different buildings. So, you know, community development is in City Hall, so if they have trouble with their HVAC, it comes over the whole City Hall budget for buildings. So I guess I just want to figure out how we can make it happen and what the needs are, how urgent they are. Is it something that needs to be done this year? And if not, if we can budget, and what incentives are out there. Thanks.
I'm going to start on answering those questions, and I'll let the chief finish. And I guess the thing to explain is their HVAC is built in an odd way, where typically you would have pipes, sheet metal square pipes running air, when insulation on the outside of those. The insulation on theirs is on the inside of the pipes. That's kind of the root of the problem. And so essentially to fix it, you have to go out and replace the whole thing, all of their ductwork. And that's, I think I was just asking the chief, about $450,000. It's too big to really put in any budget. It's just so large, it makes it difficult to be a budget item. It's probably something that we need to look at, maybe from like capital improvements or things like that. It is definitely a priority, and it's definitely something we got to figure out how to do. Certainly, we can look at some grants and things, but it just was too big of a pill to swallow on this budget.
Mr. Scrivener?
I guess that was a question that I had. I would agree with you that it sounds like a capital improvement project, and I was wondering, this didn't just pop up, has it? I mean, the building's kind of old, and I wonder why that wasn't included in capital improvement sales taxes E.
I can't obviously speak for others. We have mentioned this for many, many years. That's not intended as a criticism, but the volume, the magnitude of the work is significant also in terms of what it does to our building and the people inside of it. Now, that would be worth it, but now the expense kicks in, and to drop $450,000 on a project is just, even though we've talked about it for years, I know when I came in '99 there were complaints about headaches and things of that nature. So we're in 14 and a half years. It's just a significant expense, and our people don't complain much. And Nathan did a really good job of explaining the difficulties in 1979, why they put the insulation inside of the ductwork. I don't know, but you have to gut it now, really, and that's just a very serious problem, and it's not without resolution, except to devote a lot of money to it and a lot of time, because that's going to take a lot of time to replace that entire system.
Of course, when you can plan for an expenditure of that size, I mean, we did HVAC work in this building, and we did repairs to fire stations, and we built a new fire station, and I mean, $450,000 is a lot of money, but if you have an opportunity to plan for it and do it over the course of a including it in capital improvement or something like that, it's just another expense that you know that you have and something that you have to do. When it what's difficult is when you start trying to crowd it into an already, limited budget. So I don't know what the answer is, but it just sounds like this is a case where a little better planning would have been helpful.
Well, I agree, and I certainly would not contradict the chief. I'm sure that it has been something that's been discussed for many, many years. It's new to me, though, and I want to make sure that projects like this don't get forgotten, and that's why we've brought back the pink sheets. At the very least, and I mean at the very least, this would be a project that I would expect the police department to put it as a pink sheet every year until it does eventually get fixed, so that we know that that problem is out there. And I do think we need, I agree with your comments, we need to get to work and figure out a solution.
Right.
Mayor?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to address something Bob said, saved me from calling 10 people later or 9 people later. One thing you could always do, and I looked at this as a high priority, as Chief said, in my business, know a little bit about that kind of stuff, and even to say, or to kind of agree with what Kerry said, you could take a portion of it out of our surplus, and you could actually probably find some of it within some of the funds within this budget. So if you look at it as coming all out of one bucket, it might be too hard to grab, but if you can do it a ladle at a time, you still might be able to get it done.
Mr. Scrivener?
Yeah, I think we set a precedent of that when we came up with about 800,000 for the fire department. But again, and I concur with your comments about the pink sheets, because that does give us an opportunity to create priorities and weigh one project against another. We might have, had this been on the radar, maybe we would have not spent 800,000 on the fire department. Maybe we'd have spent some lesser amount and got this done. So, it's not like we want necessarily create a situation where one department is competing with another one, but we have to face the reality that there are limited resources, and we have to understand and know what challenges are ahead of us so that we can do a best job of spending the monies.
I agree too, and I think maybe we could evaluate the contingency within the sales tax and take a look at that as well. Ms. Carroll?
I was going to ask if for our next or future meeting, if Bill Betts could come up with some options to put on the table, such as what the mayor suggested, taking it out of different areas, and even within the sales tax or capital improvements, there sometimes are general areas that perhaps this still would fall under something where a portion could come out of it. It may still qualify. And I also wondered if it's easy to find out if there would be energy savings, because sometimes every year there would be a significant number, so that could also calculate into our decision as well. Thank you. And I know this is the first of many departments, but if they could, it might be more helpful rather than us brainstorming. Bill could probably put his finger on that easier. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's great, and be happy to put that on the agenda for the Finance Committee meeting as well, to look at those other options for funding some of these big ticket items. So thank you. Mr. Graham?
Also, could you look at to see if this project could be done in phases, or is this an all-in project too? If we can do this in phases, because certainly I'm concerned when you talk about health concerns. It's certainly a big issue for me, but this can be done in some type of phase other than an all-in. So I think we should look at that.
Chief, I did have one question for you. Considering the vacancy savings and the SIP program that Mr. Graham mentioned, and understanding that those positions are not in the budget to be filled in the next fiscal year, level of service, do you have any concerns, because the police department is such an important role in the city and the safety, the level of service that that the department will provide, do you have any concerns now that you've been in it, well, I guess with the vacancy savings and the SIP program, 6 months now that those positions have probably been vacant? Could you address that, please?
It's a difficult question, because I want the community to know that I have full faith in our staff. And whatever it takes, they're going to do. So if we all work a little harder and we all work a little smarter, will our community recognize less service? I hope not. Will we recognize the sacrifices that we have to make internally? Yes, we will. We already are. Our goal really is to continue to provide, in the community's perception, the same level of service we always have through the mechanisms that we use internally to kind of shield them from the facts that we're working short. Apologize for a slightly political answer, but I truly believe that. I mean, I mean that. We are blessed with some really, really committed professionals, and they're not going to let service diminish. They care about the community too much. And you can see that if you interact with them every single day. However, the fact is, behind the scenes, we're doing things differently. It's impacted us.
Thank you.
You know.
Mr. Scrivener.
Chief, one thing that I'm curious about, in the last few years, there have been significant expenditure on automation. The new computers in the cars and so forth. What's the dividend there? I mean, other than perhaps safety for the officers, are we going to see any kind of a technology dividend that's going to permit us to do, and maybe we're already seeing it. Maybe that's, you mentioned you had 12, you were down 12 officers. Maybe that's why we're able to provide the service with a lower number of officers.
There's a dividend, and a lot of it is on the back side of what we can retrieve with all this technology. Yeah, we still have to enter the data. We still have to type the reports, if you will, and enter all the documents that we've really always had to enter. Once that's in there, though, the dividend is what can we do with that now, with the new technology? And I think Bill would support that. We haven't realized everything that we can do yet, but some of the things we've been talking about recently, we think will go to that end where we'll be able to assess situations a little bit quicker and better, and retrieve data a little bit quicker and better. And you know, I hope that answers your question, but you still have to devote the people power to get the information into the system. But it's so much easier now to take that information and do something constructive with it.
Do you think there will ever be, I know Councilman Mahalovic really likes metrics. Do you think there will ever be a measurable dividend that you could actually create a measurement and actually show us?
Well, I'd never say never. We don't necessarily think in that way. We, as I say, we solve people problems. So that's not necessarily tangible, and it's a bit fluid, and it's a bit subjective. So applying some metrics to what we do, metrics might apply to our response times, to our clearance rates, to things of that nature. We could do that before, we can do that later. But when you deal with people problems, a metric system of assessment is more difficult. It just is, by nature of what we do.
Thank you.
Other questions of the chief on the police department tab in your binders? Okay, seeing none, the next is school resource officer, page 55. Any questions for the chief on school resource officer, page 55? Okay, seeing none, the next tab is the Mustang program, page 58 and 59 in your budget book. Are there any questions on any of the line items? Page 58 and 59. Mr. Graham?
I noticed there was a quite a significant increase from 2013 to 2014 under salaries. Is that for a specific reason under that item?
Councilman, do you have the page number, maybe?
58, Chief, under Mustang.
Thank
Yes.
Do you see anything?
Under salaries. Because it seemed like it went from 49 to, 76 for 2013 to 92. And I was just, that's a huge jump under salary, so.
Well, I don't have an obvious reason. It will fluctuate by virtue of who we assign to those, to that function. You know, if we might have someone that makes considerably less money compounded by the benefit package. That degree of difference, Bill, do you have an idea?
Yeah, I don't. I was looking, trying to figure out. It's something we probably can come back to you what the difference was there. I was looking at the personnel sheet, and I'm not sure I see it there. There might be some other areas we can find that out for you, though. So I'll get you an answer on the back end there. So.
I mean, sometimes the funding level of grants and things change, which might create a greater or less burden on local government to pick up the slack. I mean, it could be quite, I will tell you that the number of people assigned to that function hasn't changed. So, and that's why I guess we're fumbling around, because I don't know why it should change significantly. I wouldn't think it should, unless it's one of those things out of our control.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions on the Mustang program? Okay, seeing none, the next tab is animal control. Line items within the budget, page 62 and 63. Any questions under animal control, pages 62 and 63? None? Okay, the last tab for the police department is the 911, pages 66 and 67. Are there any questions for the chief? Pages 66 and 67 in the budget book. Okay. Chief, again, thank you for the presentation and for the work that your department does.
Thank you.
With the city. Next on the agenda is the mayor and council department. Bill, Nathan, who's Mr. Nicholas?
That's me, and I've got three, and I'm going to do them all. As I said in my first slide here, it's about 2% of the budget, and I plan to take about 2% of your time. That's my first page. Mayor and council, essentially it's all personnel, 87% of that, and that's all salaries. We did add back in security, which is $3,000, and we did add back in dues and publications, which is $4,500. And that's pretty much all there is in mayor and council. Can we go through all three of them, or just pause in between?
If you're ready, go ahead and proceed.
City clerk, also very, very simple. In terms of purpose, I think you all know our purpose. I did want to point out it's required by the charter, so nothing really to be done about it. 64% of their budget, of her budget, is salaries, and that's 1 1/3 FTEs. Obviously, that's Phyllis, and then Lindsay Sullivan, who fills in when Phyllis is on vacation. I think you all probably met her, is the 1/3. She's split between some other departments. There's also a big chunk there for contractual services, although it's a fairly small portion, and that is for elections. Also, the scanning of records, we take all the minutes and things. We used to do that in microfilm, now we're doing it electronically, and we actually went back and converted some of the microfilm. Did we not? Okay, converted at least some of the microfilm into electronic data. And then also, when we go through and we record either property that the city acquires or titles that the city acquires, that's the clerk's office that has to pay for that.
It's two. Did you have one more?
One more. City administrator. Well, it's 97% personnel, and that's 2 FTEs. That's me, and I have a secretary that I split with the mayor, Laura Lewis, and we got 3% for other things, which no longer includes donuts. We have no pink sheets, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you. And again, Mrs. Powell, I'd like to thank you for the work that you do within your department for the city. And Nathan, Mr. Nicholas, thank you for the work that you do within for the city as well. If we look at the Mayor and Council tab, page 10 and 11 in your budget book, are there any questions under the heading of Mayor and Council? Mr. Scribner?
Kind of going, following the same theme, I guess, as the question I asked the chief about dividends. And I know this encompasses more than just your part of the operation, Mr. Nicholas, but could you, or maybe you already are, gathering data, gathering information as to what kind of a dividend that we're going to realize from the electronic record keeping and so forth? I understand that part of that'll, is in the finance department. I understand that part of it is maybe under Mr. Betts' control. But is that something that we can look forward to? Is an understanding of how we've shifted some costs or maybe gained some efficiencies over time as we get this further implemented?
Yes, not so much in the mayor and council budget, but certainly in the city clerk's budget. As I like to tell people, the iPad program, which I was somewhat of a skeptic of putting all the agendas, has been hugely successful, and there is a concrete savings in terms of dollars. That program many times more than pays for itself, just in terms of the paper that we save and the time that we save and everything else. So that's the dividend on that side. Now, some of the stuff, the historical kinds of data, there is some savings. It's kind of intangible in terms of requests to the city clerk to retrieve data. Eventually, if it's not already online, I'm looking, Phil, to see what the status of that is. It online now?
A lot of it is.
Yeah, so people will be able to retrieve that data. But I think the biggest thing is that there's a lot of data that people can now retrieve that they could never retrieve before. And the thing about when you talk about dividends from modernization, a lot of it's just that expectations, keep going up. And so people expect us to be able to provide them that data electronically, and so we're just kind of meeting our constituents' expectations.
Well, I would say certainly it's not a priority, but at some point in time, I hope that we will be apprised of maybe some kind of a schedule of where we have direct cost offset, and probably not as a part of this budget thing, so maybe it's not even appropriate to talk about it right now. But I think that it would be kind of encouraging, I guess, to understand some of the things that we've done well.
Well, if you look at the clerk's budget, this is kind of simplistic, but in 2008, we spent $166,000 on the clerk's office, and now it's down to, I'm sorry, I'm looking at mayor and council still, I think. Yeah. Hang on a second. You should be able to see in that budget that it's been reduced. Oh, that is city clerks, okay. It was 166, and now it's down to 148 in the proposed 2014 budget.
And you think that's almost entirely cost offset from going to the electronic format?
Oh yeah, and obviously in those in those years, you've had some increase in costs and things and salaries and such that's offset part of that. But yes,
Thank you.
Other questions on the mayor and council budget? Okay, Mr. Graham?
I apologize, I have a lot of questions, but under contractual services, I see that we went from 5,000, now we're going to 8,000. Is that for a specific service, or why do we have a $3,000 increase for contractual services?
that was security that the mayor had added to the budget, and I concur that that's a good investment.
Okay. And the $500 for food, are we planning to have something for the employees or something?
Now, that would be, no. I don't think there's anything,
See, item number 514040, food. We haven't done anything in the past, but now we got $500 there.
oh, yeah, we do occasionally have things that we've funded from other sources. For instance, if you guys have a meeting or something like that, and we have to buy lunch for you guys or something like that, so we just kind of put a minimal amount in there.
Other questions? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the city clerk budget, pages 14 and 15. Are there any questions? City clerk budget, 14 and 15. Okay, seeing none, the city administrator budget, pages 18 and 19. 18 and 19. I do have a question, Mr. Nicholas, just for confirmation. In the position control and also in the salary portion of the budget, there's a line item for a communications manager. And it's my understanding that that then is offset by the vacancy savings?
Correct, that is not being funded.
Okay. I would like to make a motion that we eliminate the communications manager from the city administrator budget, and the offset account to that would be vacancy savings. It's a wash, but it just pulls it out of the budget. I don't foresee in the foreseeable future that we would ever fund a communications manager, and to me, it just confuses the budget somewhat, and so I would make a motion that we remove that from the budget.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to remove the communication manager from the budget. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Carroll?
I agree it's not appropriate for this budget, but I think it would be appropriate for a future year budget. I don't know when. I think it was appropriate at the time we had a communications director, but I think we just needed to maybe look at what the council really wanted from that position. So, your motion eliminates it. Well, I guess it could be brought back at any time. It's already out of the budget, so what you're doing is more eliminating it even down the road is what you're, I mean, is that, I just want to make sure I'm clear.
No, I just think the vacancy savings in itself, that is I think there's just a lot of confusion surrounding vacancy savings, and if we're not going to fund that position in the foreseeable future, I just don't see any purpose in leaving it in there. It's an $80,000 line item. And if somebody looks at the budget and doesn't understand vacancy savings, or that there even is a vacancy savings, they're thinking that there's $80,000 in the budget for a communications manager. And so I just feel like if there's positions within the vacancy savings or the SIP program for that fact that we're not going to fund, we should eliminate them. We can always add them back at a later date if we need to. Mr. Mihalovich.
Might also note, this makes the appearance that there's a 50,000 increase in salary in that one area of the budget from the previous budget. Although I might say that if you go back to 2009, the normal was about that overall item has gone down much a year, so keeping that on this is over the next couple.
Mr. Scrivener?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think almost every, well, every department that's had a SIP, SEP, voluntary separation, whatever it is, their numbers are inflated. Didn't we just learn that the police department's numbers are inflated by 400 and some thousand? So, to be consistent, you need to go through and reduce every budget by that amount. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I find it hard to really get a handle on exactly what the personnel costs are the way we're doing this. I really don't care for the way that we're doing it, but I'm not in charge of accounting and certainly wasn't going to raise a fuss about it. But to look at the police department's number and then have to calculate less 443,000, and then to know that you need to do that throughout this budget, to me is really not very productive.
I would agree with you. I was just taking a small step to begin with.
I understand, but I also understand why department and the city administrator, not just the one we have now, but the one prior, all wanted to go ahead and fund those positions, I guess in the hope that they would be filled sometime during the year. And I don't know exactly how the ordinances are written that authorizes certain staffing levels. I know that each department kind of clings to a certain level of staffing and wants to maintain that level and consider every vacancy as a temporary vacancy. And I don't blame them. If I was a manager or a director, I probably would want to do the same thing. But it does make it a little more difficult to understand exactly what we're paying in personnel costs and whether they've gone up or whether they've gone down or whether they're staying static.
I agree, and I guess I view the communications manager not, in my mind, not as a temporary vacancy. And there are other positions that we need to fund first when money is available, i.e. Police department personnel.
Well, I agree that there are other personnel that need to be funded. I do think that the communications director was a good thing for the city. I think that it's something that a city, we often say that a city this size needs a finance director. I think a city this size probably needs a communications manager as well. I don't think the one we had was very well utilized, very well directed. I think she was a good person. I think she did her job well to the extent that she was, that she was tasked to do her job. But I agree that it's probably not the highest priority.
Mr. Hussey?
Well, thank you. It seems as though a corrective measure, if you're having trouble with applying the vacancy savings to particular departments, is just to have Mr. Betts break the vacancy savings down into line items within those departments. And so instead of the big $600,000 at the beginning, take the 466, put that into police, take the 80, put that in. I'm hesitant to remove positions from the budget and remove the vacancy offset. I think that that seems like to be a larger conversation than just right now to go ahead and strike it out. And so I will vote against the motion for that reason. I think if we want to have a larger conversation about, do we think we need a communications manager? Do we think the city does? I think that's a bigger conversation than just tonight, right now, on the spot. I don't think that we necessarily want to get into that regarding positions in that way, and I certainly wouldn't want to do the same in other departments that are also experiencing vacancy savings without further conversation and discussion to see what are the needs, why is that position originally included, and you never know. It could be that next year's budget or the year after that there's an opportunity to fund. So I guess I'm hesitant to vote in favor of it at this time. Doesn't mean that I'm not opposed to down the line taking a closer look at things like that, but just not tonight.
Other comments? Seeing none, motion and a second on the floor. Roll call, please.
Branch,
No.
Bray, Carroll,
No?
Graham,
Nay.
Henry,
No.
Hussey,
No.
Mahalovich,
Yay.
Prather,
No.
Schulte,
Aye.
Scrivener.
No.
Motion fails. We will leave that line item within the budget. Any other discussion regarding city administrator? Okay. Next is Public Works. Mr. Marash?
All right, Janice, I had some copies of this that you could pass around to the council, but if it's a little hard to see, that way you'd have a copy at your desk or you can make some notes on. Just to give everybody an overview real quick. I have 8 slides, so I think I should go fairly quickly. And if I'm going through something, please stop and ask me a question if you'd like. The Public Works Department, the first slide is kind of an overview of our org chart and a number of positions and those kind of things. But we have 120 positions in Public Works and other large departments similar to the Police Department. Just real quickly, 6.8 positions are in the vacancy savings plans out of those 120. The 0.8 is kind of an odd thing, but in transit we have some part-time with benefits people, so they're a percentage of a person, if you will, or an FTE. So there was 2 of those in that budget like that. But if you look at the org chart, the 10 divisional budgets you'll actually find in your book are highlighted in red text. And so but what I tried to do here was give a little bit of a way of how we operate essentially with this org chart. And if you look at Public Works, our operating budget, and that includes wastewater and everybody, a little over $14 million. So it's a pretty large budget. Some of that is not just general fund, but it has some utility money in it as well. But that doesn't include our capital improvements either that we're administrating. So we'll start with the first one, engineering. Again, kind of see how it's organized, but we kind of really divide engineering up in 3 sections. We have kind of a CIP group, people who design projects, and that's their day-to-day activity. They design them, they do surveying, they do inspections of them. And then our second section would be development review and stormwater inspections. So as if you're a developer building a new subdivision, or you may be building the new Sam's Club that's coming in, you'll have to submit some plans for that. And we have a person and a half really that reviews those plans. And then on the far right there, stormwater and floodplain permitting, we have one person primarily in charge of that. And basically they're in charge of the city stormwater permit. And then we also administer a floodplain permitting program. So that's when we have these floods you see in the news and things, we really don't have a lot of structure flooding anymore. I think after the 93 flood, a lot of that was bought out, and then we administer this program pretty tightly. And so most of the new structures, or they should be all the new structures, built in such a way that they won't flood, or they're planned to be flooded in a certain way at least. And so that really helps in those events. But within engineering, we have 14 positions on that chart, and 2 of those are in the vacancy plan. One is a city engineer, which I am and was, I guess is what you would call it. And the CIP designer, that person actually, we had somebody retire that was really in the development review section, and they moved from CIP over to development review. So that's where our 2 vacancies are in that department there. Now we'll move into the operations, and Britt's here tonight as well. He's our operations director, but there's really 4 divisions in operations, so I've kind of highlighted the first one there, streets, and we'll talk about that one. But again, pretty large department in Public Works. There's 25 and a half positions. Britt is the half position. His salary is actually contained in the street department and then the parking utility. And so half of his salary is paid out of streets, although he does administer central maintenance and our airport. Within this budget, there's also 2 vacancy savings positions, and those are at the street basically street workers, if you will, doing the actual work in the field. Those are the two positions that are vacant in this budget. One good thing that we really appreciate, the seasonal salaries were restored to the budget. We really utilize a lot of summer help to help us painting curbs, mowing, right-of-ways, things of that nature. Not a lot of technical jobs, but we do get a lot of work out of those seasonal employees, so we're real happy about that. And what I've tried to do on each of these budgets is just say kind of budget highlights and kind of some goals and challenges for each. So that's kind of the format here. But really, when you look at the street department, what are they doing? We're tasked with maintenance of our streets and right-of-ways, but you can see we got about 250 centerline miles of streets. Then the stormwater structures, 13,000 of those, over 830,000 feet of stormwater system, and then quite a few traffic signals for a city of this size, but 38 traffic signals are school crossings that have the maybe inactivated with a push button. It's not quite a traffic signal, but it does take a fair amount of maintenance. The school zones, those are the flashing lights. And then we have city-maintained streetlight systems, such as the downtown system with the Acorn lights. So we have an electrician in the group that goes around and maintains those streetlights and signals. Some of our challenges that we're evaluating. Also, besides the reduced staff, so we're kind of adjusting our crews there. Basically, with the two vacancies, we're down to basically a crew. Usually we have 2 or 3 men crews, so that's basically a full crew we're down. So we're adjusting that level of work. The other thing is, we haven't been replacing equipment at a very good rate lately. And so that is a concern to us, or a challenge we've recognized. And, that equipment as it ages, hopefully it doesn't all come due at once, but that is something that our other departments, such as like wastewater, we have a pretty good where we're keeping up with our equipment replacement. Here at the street department, we don't have any equipment in this budget, and even in the last couple years, it's been pretty minimal. So if you look for pink sheet items, this is one of the pink sheet items. We talk about some equipment replacement. I think we talked about the patch truck the other night, but we had some other items in there, such as a trailer and rehabbing 3 snowplows, because snowplows are very expensive items. And Britt had found a way to maybe go and had 3 of them rehabbed, so save a little money there. And I think there was a street sweeper, very high cost item, but they don't tend to last a long time. But we were lucky several years ago with an equipment plan to replace a lot of the fleet at the street department. So it's still in pretty good shape, but over time, as that thing ages, that will become a problem. So it's something to be alert of in the future. Going to central maintenance, this is another one in operations, but 8 positions authorized, and one of what I think is a highlight there, our parts budget. They're tasked with maintaining not only street department equipment, but police cars and every other thing we do at the city, buses and fire trucks and things of that nature. But that part budget is flat from last year. I think we're on good track. Britt and I have discussed this quite a bit and believe that we should be in good shape. It just depends what breaks down. But as our fleet ages, that general fleet of the city, the equipment, the parts budget tends to rise a little bit. So we'll be watching that and watching for those clues. That what they also do, they maintain our central fueling and vehicle wash down there at their facility. And then again, monitoring that parts budget would be a challenge of ours over the coming years. Whoops, went backwards. Okay, over at the airport, another operations division, 2 positions over there. The general fund, and some of these, I know Councilman Schulte, you had indicated maybe not talking about the utility funds. This one has a subsidy though, and I had them all in here anyway, so I'll try to go through them pretty fast if it's all right with you. But there is a general fund subsidy for the airport, and there's 2 positions authorized: the manager and a maintenance person. Again, we had a pink sheet item in the budget, and it was basically had to do with maintenance personnel and maybe some summer help, if you will, seasonal help. A lot of mowing at the airport, as you can well imagine. We have some tractors to do that, but you got to have some people helping. So right now we're filling that item with folks from the street department. But if we were to maybe we even talked about realigning the budget to put those people actually in here so we get more of a true cost of how we're maintaining, or what it costs to maintain the airport. So that's something we can also work on internally. And then just some upcoming things. We have a couple major capital projects we're working on. One of them is actually, I believe we just received the bids on it, and it might be on your next council agenda, is the voltage regulator. I think it's a $300,000+ project over there. But then next year, and these are both grant projects, by the way, is a runway, basically runway reconstruction and its lighting. So that's a very expensive project. And I believe both of those are 95% grant funded. So the match comes out of the half-cent sales tax CIP. So go to the next one, parking division. They have 7.5 positions. Again, there's Britt's other half in there. But again, on this particular utility, no general fund subsidy, and it actually pays a chargeback to the general fund, and I listed it there for this year, a little over $150,000. Some of the things in the budget, one of the highlights are really we're looking at replacing our scooters with 2 electric scooters. Right now they're gas powered. It's something, again, on that maintenance cycle, just keeping up with the equipment. But they quit making the version we have now, and so I think Britt and the guys have searched around and found these that would be adequate for our situation. Just kind of, again, describing under the goals and challenges what these guys do. Of course, everybody knows we have parking structures and lots and things of that nature, and they're tasked with maintaining those and then enforcing the parking regulations. There was a pink sheet item for this group. I think it was a total cost of $7,000. It reflected the changes that we would like to see in our classification of how we class our personnel down there, more similar to other things, guys at the street department and other divisions. So that's what that pertains to. Wastewater division, another large division of Public Works, 35 positions, no general fund subsidy. The chargeback to those folks back to the general funds a little over, or close to $800,000 this year. If you look in the budget, they have about, I think, 5 pickup trucks and then various equipment such as pumps, blowers. I think some excavation equipment attachments are in there, things of that nature. The really goals and challenges, obviously, much like the street department, they have a pretty good sized system to maintain. And then our treatment plants, of course, are state of the art, but do require a lot of attention. The other thing we're working on is implementing our $35 million bond capital improvement plan. So that's some of the big CIPs you see come out of wastewater. And then, again, we always have ever-present compliance issues with DNR and EPA. So probably hear more about those in the future. On to transit. The transit division, I think we've discussed it a lot here in the recent past, but it has 25 positions. We have 2.8 of those are the vacancy savings positions in transit. The subsidy this year in 2014, I wanted to highlight that a little bit. I think Bill did the other night as well, but it's about $360,000 this year. It has been quite a bit more in the past. That is because of some of the accounting, I think some of the procedures that have been followed here recently. They looked at taking money out of its fund balance and leveling that subsidy off. This year anyway. So wanted to point out, I went through and kind of tried to add up the grants, grant support for this group, but they do a little over $1 million comes in grants to help with the operating costs of transit. And just some of the things they do every day, our goals and challenges, they operate 6 fixed routes. We have 4 tripper routes and then 8 paratransit buses. Another thing coming up, we have a leaky roof down at the Miller Street facility, which is for our transit division. Then underneath is our central maintenance. We feel like we can fund that out of our CIP account right now. That's allotted to transit. And then, of course, just continually looking at how we can improve transit and maximize its efficiency. Over the last couple of years, many changes have been made, and we think there's probably some more to come yet. So really, that's it. Try to answer any questions. We're new to some of these divisions, but we'll give it a good shot if we can.
Mr. Morash, thank you for your presentation, and to thank you and your staff for all the work that you do for the city. We'll go through these tabs like we did the others. Public Works Central Maintenance. Pages 107 and 108. Are there questions for Mr. Marash? Central maintenance, pages 107 and 108. So everybody had time to find those? Okay. Public Works Administration section, pages 111 and 112. Are there any questions? 111 and 112. Okay. The Public Works tab, pages 115 and 116. Questions 115 and 116. Okay, seeing none, Public Works Streets Division, pages 119 and 120. 119 and 120. Questions? No? Okay, Mr. Marash covered some of the enterprise funds, airport parking, transit, wastewater. Is the council prepared to look at those this evening, or would you rather wait and get through the general fund items and come back to these four? Any preference? No preference? Okay, airport. Pages 128 and 129 and 130. 128 through 130. Are there any questions regarding the airport? Y'all are quiet tonight. Parking division. 134, 135, 36, and 37. 134 through 137. Are there any questions regarding parking? Mr. Prather.
I just noticed an increase on the admin administration charges. Not sure which line item that is. 526020. It went from actual on 2012 from 139,000 up to 154,000, about a $15,000 increase. I just wonder if someone can explain why there's such a large increase, what we're anticipating.
We moved part of Mr. Smith's salary into that. We increased the amount that was in that.
Mr. Prather.
And one item not too far from that is advertising. There was nothing in 2012, and it was bumped $3,000. Just kind of curious as to what kind of advertising we're doing for parking.
You'll see advertising in a lot of these budgets, and usually that is for hiring employees, and so it's employment advertising.
And in parking, there could be a few additional things we add in there as well.
Are we anticipating hiring this fiscal year?
I would defer to Mr. Smith on that.
Yeah. Britt is here today. He could probably give us some more detail, but, when we do.
It's going to make sure on parking with it, when it comes to hiring, since they're an enterprise fund, they wouldn't be part of our freeze with SIP and vacancy savings since they're an enterprise fund of their own. So if they did lose a person or whatnot, Mr. Smith would be authorized.
The idea of the advertising budget there, we're often looking to partner with folks in the downtown area in reference to anything we can do to promote parking within the downtown, assistance in the downtown. So we've always tried to carry that.
They say it's not.
Hold it in a little bit.
They say in the back you're not.
Yeah, they're waving their arms.
Test. Test. 2.0. Within the parking budget, we're often looking to partner with folks in the downtown area, and so we try to keep a little money in the budget in case those opportunities for partnership come up where we can promote either where our parking is or other events within the downtown. That was a lot of work for a short answer.
Other questions regarding the parking division? Mr. Hussey?
I just have a quick question on the two vehicles, the electric scooters as opposed to gas-powered. Will we see like a long-term efficiency savings in those as well, since they're electric?
Yes, we do hope that we will see a long-term benefit there. And we spent a lot of time researching it. We didn't make this change lightly. We spent the last 3 years looking for the right vehicle. We found we don't want to be out on the bleeding edge of technology, but we do want to try to be out there a little bit. There's a couple other communities that have already switched to them and have been very pleased with them. That's the reason we're heading that direction.
Mr. Scrivener?
When are you planning to do that? And the funds for that's going to come from what parking funds?
Yes, 100% of the funds that support parking come from parking operations. There is absolutely no general revenue subsidy. And the funds would come from the parking fund to pay for those vehicles.
And that's in 2013?
It's in the 2013 budget.
Other questions? Mr. Nicholas?
The parking has one pink sheet item, which is some personnel increases. Of course, parking can fund that themselves. The reason that I did not include it in the budget is I felt it needed to go through the normal process, and I would recommend that it does that it goes through, I believe, administration is the process, and I actually support it. I just didn't put it in the budget because of the process.
Thank you. Mrs. Carroll?
So do we need to add that to the next administration committee next month? Or are you going to just go ahead and do that?
I believe that Ms. Strope needs to do some work to get prepared for that, so
Okay.
I'd really defer
So
to
whenever
her
the time is
when
right,
she's
you'll
ready.
just go ahead. We don't need to ask for it to be done. You'll just go ahead and put it on for us. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Other questions? Thank you. Okay. Mr. Graham?
I know that going back to gas, under gas, oil, and antifreeze, I'm glad to see that we are breaking that out by the various departments. And I see that there's $132,000 for you in that area, Matt. And I was wondering, I know you don't have this tonight, but if you get me a list of, not the individuals, but the positions or that actually take home vehicles, city vehicles after hours, and possibly the number of times in which the previous year they had to be dispatched that will require them to use the vehicles, if you could.
We can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next tab is transit. Pages 142 through 145 in your budget. 142 through 145. Are there any questions regarding transit? And just to point out, Mr. Betts, correct me if I'm wrong, we're using approximately $300,000 this year out of the reserve fund in the transit division to fund transit. So next year, we will have to make up that $300,000 within the budget. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Nicholas?
I just, for the record, want to make clear where that money came from, because it might appear as if we're taking money from transit. What happens is that we make payments to transit for the subsidy that are programmed in, and they're based on what we expect that subsidy to be across the year. But transit may do better than what we expect, in which case they don't use all the subsidy that they were given. And what we used to do is we'd go through at the end of the year and equalize that out. so that we were only paying for the difference that it took for them to operate. And we haven't done that in a couple years, and so as a result, they built up some money, and we're just simply putting that back to the use it was originally intended.
Thank you for the explanation. Mr. Mihalovich?
Would that not normally go into the fund balance, or is that because transit's different?
If it had been swept out when it occurred, it would have gone into the fund balance.
Mr. Scrivener?
I might also point out that approximately, or maybe in the first year that I was on the council, which is, 5 years ago, I guess, there was about an $800,000 deficit the other way, and the council had to come up with about $800,000 out of our fund balance to make transit whole. So it kind of goes both ways. This time we were able to sweep 300 out, but a previous time we put 800 in. So I do want to say this, and I would just urge caution for the council, and you probably don't need to be told this, but I'm going to say it anyway, that this 300 creates an issue for next year, because that's 300,000 we won't have next year. So any kind of ongoing expense that you're considering adding to this year's budget, just remember it'll be there next year, and we're starting with a $300,000 hole.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding transit? Okay, wastewater. Pages 148 through 156. 148 through 156. Any questions? Okay, again, Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hilpert, let's try to look at City Councilor.
And I think I can do that quickly for you. I have no overhead. I have all of, if I could do both City Councilor's budget and the municipal court at the same time, be very brief.
Thank you.
I have all of 4 2/3 employees between both departments, so I'm going to take the time to introduce them. Cindy Lambert is our paralegal. She's sitting in the back, I think in a white shirt. Yep, she's the queen bee. She tracks everything in the law department, frankly. All the contracts that you see for Matt's projects, she drafts initially. She's a professional fly spicker, which means she finds all my mistakes, and if you see a typo, it's because I did the wrong process and she didn't get to see it. One of her most difficult jobs is tracking every contract that we have. She's the focus of communications in the law department and holds the good of the city very close to her heart. And she's also cross-trained to cover municipal court. Jeremy Cover is also seated 2 seats over from Miss Lambert. He's the associate city attorney, and I tell people that I'm the city attorney. I'm the attorney for you, the 10 of you, as well as the department heads, and he gets everybody else. So he's got about 400 clients, and I have 20. He handles issues such as sewer collections, work comp, code enforcement issues, all the non-council commissions, Parks Commission, keeps him very, very busy. He is also cross-trained to cover the window in case the court needs to have a staff meeting. And this kind of gets me to the crux of where we're at. Barb Schaefer's been with the municipal court for 35 years. Sadly, she's seen 4 generations of criminals come before her. Jana Wood is the other court clerk. She's retired from the circuit court for 10 years and has been with us for 10 years. And they both work from the very second they show up to the very second they leave. It is very impressive. Lindsay Sullivan, I have 2/3 of her. She splits her time between the city councilor's office and the municipal court. And everything I said about Cindy, Barb, and Janet, you can say about Lindsay. She does all of that as well. With regard to court efficiency, although my numbers are a little old, we have 2 1/3 court clerks, and Columbia has 8. And if my data is still right, we do about 4,000 cases per clerk, and Columbia does about 1,200 per clerk. So why did I spend a couple of minutes talking about my people? It's because people is all that I have. We deal with briefs, lawsuits, and contracts. We need toner and training and people. We don't need salt, bullets, and hoses. Municipal court, produces due process and it produces money. It brings in about $800,000 to $1 million each and every year. And while I have the highest regard for the judges and the prosecutors, they don't do it alone. The clerks are the efficient driver of that institution. They have to bring all the court cases and get them done, get them for the court, set them on the clerk, set them on the dockets, deal with the police, and bringing those over, and inputting those in the system. We definitely have gotten some efficiencies recently from the court software, and we continue to get them from e-filing. So both the police and IT are very helpful to the court system. So a couple of highlights or points of interest in my budget. Dues and publications in the city council's budget is primarily Westlaw. It's a legal research engine that we use. So if we need to find out what the law is, we look it up, and so we can get back to you. Training, our training money is used for Jeremy and I to maintain our licenses. We're both required 15 hours a year plus 2 hours of ethics to keep our bar license. You both require that we have a bar license, and you really want us to keep up to date on the law. We wouldn't do you any good. Cindy Lambert also is on the board of the Missouri Paralegals Association, and she also has training requirements. All the 3 municipal court clerks also have to be certified, and they keep their training requirements up. There is money in my budget for outside counsel because there are simply some things that I don't know. A good example is the police seat. You almost have to have somebody over there all the time, and we have some outside counsel doing that. A change in this year's court budget. What once was one big category of professional services, we've broken into 3. One is outside counsel, and that is the people that the judge appoints when someone comes in municipal court facing jail time and has a threat of jail time and can't afford their own attorney. So the courts have to appoint someone for them. So that's divided out this year. Court security, which the council instituted last year, has been a very good thing for municipal court. It was a bad situation before that, and it's worked out well. Third thing is the professional services budget, which is very small, but could be things like assisting us with court software. The biggest bulk of supplies for both of us are, for both departments, are toner, and we that's what we do, and we produce in that fashion, so that's the biggest issue of our supplies. I did participate with the discussion of my budget with both the mayor and the city administrator, and I asked for nothing that wasn't already funded. I would have liked to give the quality people that I have a raise, and obviously we don't have money for that, but if all I've got is compliments, then I want to spend them, and I want you to hear it, and I want the public to hear it. From the law department and municipal court, you get efficiency and you get value. We have efficiencies that places like Columbia can only dream about. And my people, and almost all the other employees are rock stars, and they're not lucky to have a job. We're lucky to have them at our job. So I'm glad to answer any questions that you all have.
Mr. Hilpert, thank you for your presentation, and thank you and your staff for the work that you do within our city. So thank you. City Councilor budget, pages 22 and 23. Are there any questions for Mr. Hilpert, pages 22 and 23? None? Municipal Court, pages 26, 27. Are there any questions regarding Municipal Court? Mr. Scrivener?
Have you had any feedback yet, or is it too early to assess what the changes in court hours, has that had any significant impact on either the operation of the city hall or on the efficiencies gained? Or
I think it's been very good. Although I know it causes some problems for Bill's people being in the hallways. The judge has wrapped tighter control in the courtroom to kind of make up for that, and the court security folks are doing an extra job. It has kept us from needing to use any overtime, so it's not a huge savings, but it does keep our court clerks from having to use some overtime. So it's been some efficiencies there. We've dipped maybe a tad in collections, but it could be unrelated. It could be people having to wake up and show up to court because they've got to be a little bit earlier. The court had a meeting with staff last week to determine if they wanted to go forward. I don't know what his, with daytime court, and I don't know what his decision is, but it certainly seemed to lean towards going down that route. The prosecutor has a bit of difficulty because during the day now he can't have court hours, so I volunteered Jeremy and I to cover an hour and a half a day of municipal court during the day in case he has people to meet. It's on Wednesday, so we'll just schedule it. But I think us giving up our time, one of us can usually be here, will be better than everyone having to work at night till 8 or 9 or 10. So I'm very happy with it. I hope the judge is, and I hope the council is.
And one other question, it's my understanding that there is a scheduled in the near future or sometime in the future a further electronic application to the court system as well. Is that something that is on the schedule, and can you share with us when?
Well, I believe you're referencing, we just instituted the e-ticketing, and that's going through now. We're going to try to go paperless with Bill's guys in IT, and if you've ever seen our court, it's super duper small, and we've got files, I guess I shouldn't disclose them, at other places, and I'm very hopeful that that will allow us to make some good decisions about how we can conduct court, because it's possible we could have more done in court and less done in there, certainly saving space, which is at a premium where we're at. So if that's what you mean, that's what we're looking forward to, going paperless, and I think I'll toot our own horn and say, Law's been one of the first to go paperless, and they all expected us to present it. We've done very well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, I have 7:13, and without objection, accept a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. A quick announcement before we vote. Our next meeting is Thursday, August 15th, 5:30 to 7 here in the council chambers. Also would like to remind the public that on Monday, August 19th is our public hearing on the budget at our regular city council meeting at 6 p.m. and would encourage those who would like to speak regarding the budget to attend that meeting. One last thing, again, I'd like to thank all the departments